Howdy, folks. Today we're going to get philosophical. Well, not really, but we are going to be discussing mobile editing and whether sharing each other's edits is a great way to learn right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kersten Luts, and before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. Come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps me get even more cool guests on the show. It's just one click. That is all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, the man with a PhD in philosophy, the Adobe Lightroom Mobile and community guru, street photographer, film aficionado, podcast trendsetter, and all-round giant of a man. Give it up for none other than Toby Baier. Toby, man, how's it going?
Thank you. How are you?
I'm very
Wow,
well.
that was an introduction.
Thanks. Well, this podcast, I think, is famous for the introductions.
All
Good
right.
to see you, man. We've just spent a whole week. Well, actually a whole week, didn't we?
Yeah, it was
Together
a
in
whole week.
London at the photography show. And you made it back to Hamburg by train.
I did. I came to London by train and I made it back to Hamburg by train, which is my preferred way of travels. So I'm, as you said, I'm not a giant, but I'm quite tall, long legs, and I just don't like flying so much. I don't like airports. I don't like the situation at the security, waiting for boarding, like everyone like pushing in, although we all have assigned seats anyway. And then on the plane, it's always just too, like, my legs are longer than the place to the next row. It's just really annoying. I don't like flying. So whenever I can, take the train. And London is actually quite nice. Going through Cologne and Brussels to London is 10 hours maybe, but taking the plane, going through to the airport in Hamburg, then taking the plane and doing all that, landing in Heathrow and taking Elizabeth Line, it's always 5 hours. So yes, it's faster, but the day is wrecked anyway. So I'd rather wreck it by going on a train ride, having some breaks at nice train stations, and being able to stand up at any time. And it's much better.
And of course, you can do a lot of mobile editing whilst you're sitting on a train, which is even better.
Indeed, working on a train is much easier than on a plane because well, not in Germany, but in most places you have internet on a train, sometimes also in Germany. And yeah, it's easier to carry your stuff around, to get like your iPad, if you have it in your luggage, can get it out anytime. Yeah, so I do that, yes.
And you were at the photography show. I mean, we did a whole bunch of different things together. We did some photo shoots together, but you were at the Adobe booth at the photography show just now, and you did a lot of editing. You did a really cool thing, which was like an edit shootout almost type of a thing. Tell me a little bit about
It
that.
was named Dual, but we didn't like that. So Katrine Eismann, my colleague at Adobe, she's a product manager for content and learning, but she's actually just a great photographer, and she does all the content creation for learning tutorials and for the Lightroom Academy. If you go to lightroom.adobe.com, there's also the Academy, which is just web pages explaining how photography works and how to use Lightroom. And she does the curation for a community and all these things. But yeah, mainly she's just a very great photographer, and I learn a lot from her. So we did some kind of duo where we take the same photo and I edit it on my iPad in Lightroom, and she edits on her desktop in Photoshop. So very different results, but both is worth it, and we just wanted to have some fun on it. Yeah.
I think mobile editing is a super interesting thing because I find myself. I mean, I'm an avid I don't even know how many years I've been using Lightroom, as in like the desktop version of Lightroom.
Mhm.
I mean, at least 10 years, 12 years, something. I mean, it's really for a very long time. Um, but the whole idea of mobile editing is becoming more and more attractive, especially on iPad, and even on. I find myself using Lightroom Mobile on iPhone a lot. Just when I take a shot and then I want to do a quick edit, it's much better, much more effective than Apple's built-in editing tools.
it has changed so much over time, right? So like 10 years ago, we started Lightroom Mobile as a companion app for what is now Lightroom Classic, right? So we didn't have two Lightrooms on the desktop then. So that started later. So
Yeah,
it
that's
was
weird, by
just
the
a
way.
companion. Sorry?
That's a weird thing, by the way. I still can't get my head around that.
To have two different versions of Lightroom?
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense if you think about it. So Lightroom Classic is for people like you and me who shoot like thousands of photos each weekend. Like if you're a wedding photographer or sports photographer, you have like tens of thousands of photos per weekend. And uploading all these to the cloud, no way. So no one wants to do that. So for local storage, for local workflows, Lightroom Classic is the way to go. But if you like, actually, for me, Lightroom in the cloud works because I only have something like 90,000 photos overall, right? So, and I can easily handle that in my cloud catalog. So I have the same photos on my desktop, on web, on mobile, everywhere, right? So um, there is place for both things, for Lightroom Classic and Lightroom. So why not? And then when we started Lightroom Mobile like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, actually, it was meant as a companion app because we needed something mobile and it was just for viewing photos. But it has turned into first a fully fledged ecosystem client. You could do anything that you could do on the desktop version on mobile. And now, in the recent years, it has turned into an own system. Like you can use Lightroom Mobile without ever touching desktop or web, right? And you can do anything on it. And many people use it. Like we have more people on mobile than on desktop. Probably because it's also free.
Well, yes, there is that, but it's it's an interesting thing because it's a completely different workflow, and we'll talk a little bit more about workflow in a minute. And I think I think like a lot of people initially, I thought, well, I'm gonna edit on Lightroom on the desktop because I have all the tools and I could do all these different things.
You
What
have
I've
the real estate, right? The screen is bigger. That's it.
Yeah, and it's initially I used to think like, well, why should I edit something on a sort of on a cutback version originally, years ago, when I have all of those tools available to me on the desktop. But of course, what I've learned is that I don't use all of the tools all of the time.
Right.
And I mean, that is the thing, I recently switched to a Nikon Z8. I use probably 10% of what that thing can do, realistically. I don't need all of the. I mean, maybe one day I might find myself in need of some of those features, but not all the time. And so what I found for myself is that I really like to go out and maybe do some street photography or something, and then just sit in the cafe, whip out my iPad and just do some edits on the iPad and then be done with it. And then I'm cutting out this whole part of the process of like taking stuff home, uploading it onto the desktop, starting it, and then, and then moving the finished edits back to wherever. I can cut all of that out just by using, um, Lightroom on iPad.
Absolutely. And since the catalog is synced across all devices, you can start on an iPad, just get the first shots in, edit them, and then care about the rest later. And then once you're home, you can go to your desktop, do some like maybe on a bigger screen, go into more details on masking and on whatnot, cleaning up the image. But then you can go back to mobile and every edit syncs to mobile. And then maybe export, like at the frame, you have the export with border option in Lightroom iOS, which makes it pretty on Instagram. And then you have the photo where it needs to be on your phone, so you can upload it to Instagram, right? Yeah, that's how I use it. There's many different approaches. I have a lot of presets that I do on mobile. It doesn't matter whether you like apply a preset on your desktop or on mobile. It's the same thing. Right. Yeah. And then you need to know a couple of tricks because not all UI makes it into mobile in the first go. So a couple of years back, we added AI masking where you can select subject or select sky. We have that on mobile, but then we added select people. And then you could go into like just select the lips or just the facial hair or just facial skin or whatever, is all separated in Lightroom Desktop. You can just go into all these options. That's not directly available on mobile, but you can still get these masks by just applying an adaptive preset. You go into presets, go to premium presets, make like, what's it called? Select adaptive portrait, glamour portrait, something like that. Just any of those. And then you have all these masks. And then you can go to the masking UI on mobile and have all these masks. And that's one trick I can I can talk about. Yeah, it's all there. It's all in your pocket. You can have it on your tablet. You can have it on your phone. I think the best part of it is just that you can have it synced across all devices. When you, no matter where you edit something, you'll have it on the other device too.
What do you think is the one thing that makes Lightroom Mobile uniquely powerful on a mobile device compared to, let's say, other editing apps that are out there?
Oh, of course, I cannot speak directly about our competition. Our legal team would probably not like that so much. But it is just the desktop version. We use the same code, like the Camera Raw plugin that is in Photoshop, that is in Lightroom Desktop, is also in Lightroom Mobile. It's the same code. We use the same algorithms to manipulate your pixels, and that means you can do raw editing on your phone, like, and that is something that most other competitors cannot do, or not at the professional scale that we do it. Like your workhorse, like Lightroom Classic, that has been the product of choice for many photographers for like a decade or more. It's the same algorithms that run on your phone, and that's a level of professionality that you don't get with many of our competitors.
Well, it seems like
Yeah.
it seems quite. I mean, from the outside, it seems really interesting and also kind of difficult to make something work on, let's say, iOS as well as Android. When something that originated on a completely different platform. Um, I mean, how difficult is that really to make
It
it work?
is difficult. It is not easy. It's not out of the box. But we've done it for so many years now. We know where the pitfalls are. It's not that hard after all. Like once we know how it works, the new stuff, the AI stuff, especially the Gen AI stuff, is harder, right? So models take a lot of RAM, a lot of memory. Many of those cannot run on a mobile device because you just have limited memory. It's that thing again. But most of these models, like generative expand that you now have in ACR, or these beautiful things like, have you tried the reflection removal in the
Yes.
Photoshop beta?
Yes.
Or no, it's the experimental feature, right? The tech preview
Yeah.
in Photoshop. That's just on device. There's no no server communication happening there. And yes, there's always the opportunity, if you on mobile don't have enough memory or something, you can do that on the server, but then you need internet, and internet is slow, blah, blah, blah. So there are challenges doing stuff on mobile, but so far, we always found a way around it. Yeah.
The thing that interests me really in particular is the kind of transition or conversion in terms of user experience from something that is originally being operated with a mouse or a graphics tablet, let's say, and then to convert that experience into something that you could do on a touch screen, especially, let's say, I mean, especially on a small scale on an iPhone, for example. You know, how difficult is that to convert that experience? Is that hard?
It is hard, but we are happy enough to have interaction designers and user interface designers who are specialized for mobile interfaces. And yes, of course, you cannot do something like mouse over effects, like hovering effects. You move your mouse over something and then something else happens. That's not possible. But then other things are possible. It's a touch screen, so you can do multi-touch. Have you ever tried holding down your finger on the photo while moving one of the sliders in the details section, it gives you the same effect that you get on the desktop when you hold down the Alt key or Command key, or I don't even know which one.
Yes.
Like
So in the sharpening module,
sharpening masks and something like
yes,
that.
I
Yeah.
have done that.
So there are different options. We make use of them. Other things are not possible, and that is a challenge, of course. But then you need great interaction designers, and they can get things solved. It's not easy. Of course, it's not easy. And then having I'm on the iOS team, which is convenient because there are just so many iPhones. There are quite a lot, yes, but not as many as different Android devices. So the Android team has a much bigger challenge with all these different devices with different specs, different screen sizes, different resolutions, and input options. So Android is a really tough thing. I don't envy those people to work on that.
See, I never actually,
Yeah, but they
I
can
never really
still do
thought
it.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about this, but you're right. I mean, it's because I haven't actually used an Android device, to be honest with you.
Android is a zoo. It's amazing. It's like so many different things, powerful, very weak devices. You have to do a lot of the computational stuff in the web, actually. Like select subject is a web thing for Android. It's an on-device thing for iOS, because we just know what possibilities we have on the iOS device. Yeah.
Are there any any features on a desktop version that are difficult, if not impossible, to translate onto iOS, for example, or a mobile device?
Impossible? Good question. I don't know. So the biggest difference is not the input options, like can I do mouse over or touch screen or something like that. The biggest difference is just real estate. Like how much space is there to explain what's happening, to offer options, all the panels and sliders and dials and knobs and whatnot. On the desktop, you can go really wild and show anything. Like in the masking, that was my example previously. Select person, then you get a long list of, do you want hair, do you want facial hair, do you want eyes, sclera, lips, whatever. Doing that on a mobile, well, it is harder because you just don't have as much real estate. So you have to navigate the user through that experience and see what is possible, do as much automatically as possible, but then still giving our users the opportunities that they need and the customization that they need. So that's the biggest challenge, real estate.
So with all these challenges and the differences in on the when it comes to the input surface, for example, that also has an impact on workflow, for example. Um, what is sort of the ideal workflow, or let's put it this way, in what way does the workflow change when you're, as a photographer, when you're changing from, using Lightroom on desktop to using Lightroom on mobile?
There is no perfect. There's no optimum. There's so many different workflows people can use, and it's always changing. Like as we add more features, like in the Lightroom desktop version, we just last year added the local storage option. So you're not bound to the cloud catalog anymore. You can work directly on your local storage, local hard drive. Edit photos directly in a hard drive folder. It puts an XMP file, like the edit settings, next to it, and if you import or upload, everything then is synced. But until then, it's just in that folder. So that changed a lot for me. I completely changed my culling to be offline instead of online. You could do your culling while importing from the device. Yes, that's possible. But it's just not convenient for me. So previously, I always just upload everything and then delete it again once my bandwidth is okay. I have fiber, so why not? But now I changed that from that to just putting everything into a local folder and then doing the culling locally in Lightroom Desktop and then importing to cloud. On mobile, it depends on whether you shoot with your mobile camera, like your phone camera. Many people do that, and it's fine. Why not? Like the cameras are producing pretty good things. Of course, it's a very small lens, and of course, it's highly computational photography, but you can still get to good results. You mean, you've met Russell, right? Russell is only using his iPhone now for photography. And if you have the right lights and everything, you can get to very, very good results. If you do that, then you don't need to connect any cameras, devices, something. You can just directly access your device photos that you shot with your internal camera from Lightroom. Like there's this tab right now on the bottom of Lightroom Mobile. Go to device, just edit your photos. You can set it to auto import to have everything in the cloud immediately as you shoot it, or you can just go to device photos and whatever you edit just gets automatically uploaded to the cloud catalog.
Is it working with
lots of opportunity? Like there's so many possibilities. There's no optimum. It depends on how much you shoot, how many pictures you take, what you need. If you need something in the cloud really fast, then just do an auto upload from your camera, because maybe you have someone somewhere else working on the same catalog, just doing the edits and, I don't know, putting it on a news site or something. If you're a wedding photographer or event photographer or sports photographer, you certainly don't do that. And you rather probably connect your camera to an iPad later and select which photos to upload and go that way. The benefit of mobile devices is mostly then they're almost always connected to the internet. Desktop computers sometimes are not, like they need a Wi-Fi connection or a wired connection or something. But on mobile phones, 5G, why not use that?
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, to me, that's the biggest benefit is the fact that, you can just quite easily chill out. I mean, I do it all the time, to be honest with you. I do that all the time, especially when I'm out and about in London. Often I will just hang in a cafe for half an hour and have a coffee and do some editing, because why not? And likewise on the tube, because as you know, everything takes an hour in London. Doesn't matter where you want to go, it always takes an hour. If you want to go to the next train station, the next underground station, there's guaranteed to be some kind of hold up. Something's not moving, it's going to take an hour. You want to get to the other side of town, it's going to take an hour. Plenty of time to edit. Or two, yeah, exactly, or two. So, we had that issue. Was it on the Sunday when the Elizabeth line was not working?
Yes, in the morning. It was quite quiet on the show, and we wondered why are no people coming, and the Elizabeth line was there was some kind of strike or something. I don't know.
Yeah. As there usually is. That's usually something. I tell you what, my stepson has an encyclopedic knowledge of the train timetable. He's a total train nerd. And so whenever I have to travel anywhere by train, I usually text him beforehand just to give me the update on what's running and what isn't. It's one of these things.
Yeah, but then the other thing you could do on a train or while commuting or something, or sitting in a cafe, is doom scrolling. And who wants that? Like at the moment, looking at social media is really tough, mostly. And I actually, to avoid that, just open Lightroom and find my last photos and do some editing. And maybe I upload something to social media, but maybe you're not. So just scrolling through your library, having all my photos always with me, going back, like going to people, looking at old photos from my kids or whatever, is almost always better than looking at some social media.
And just the fact that you can have like 20,000, 50,000 pictures on your device is nuts. But I mean, really, if you think about it, we're both old enough to remember a time when, even one digital image would take up more. I mean, my first desktop, I was thinking about this the other day. My first PC that I ever bought many, many years ago, I think the hard drive was something like 20 megabytes. I don't know, was it 20 megabytes?
Yeah,
Something like it
yeah,
was
sounds
ridiculous.
familiar.
It was
Yeah,
ridiculous. I have
wouldn't
Lightroom.
even fit one of your Z8 raw files.
Exactly. I have PSD files that are many, many, many times that size. Unbelievable.
It
Um,
is, and then of course this is not always all on your phone. Like there's previews on our phone just to be able to scroll through them quickly. The originals are in the cloud, and you don't even need to download them if you want to edit them. You can work on the smart preview, and if you want to then render a high-res version of that as a JPEG to your phone because you want to send it to someone, it then downloads the original after editing, and then you can render it. Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't actually know, and you showed me in London, was the whole Lightroom community thing, which I absolutely love.
Oh,
That's such a cool thing.
yeah. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it's one of our best hidden gems. Yes, I don't know
It
why.
really is.
Because it's right there, right? It's in every version of Lightroom except Classic, because Classic is non-cloud. But all other Lightrooms, web, desktop, mobile, everywhere is the community, and people just don't seem to find it, understand it. I don't know. We are confused about it. We're doing a lot of testing around that too to find out what's happening. But every time I talk about community and what you can do with it, everyone's amazed. So we could do it here if you want to. If you let me, I will
Oh,
just talk about
absolutely.
community for an hour.
But I tell you what, I love the whole idea because I remember we were just walking. And you're like, "Oh, have you seen the community?" I'm like, "I haven't. I don't even know what that is." Unbelievable. Yeah, tell us a little bit about what the Lightroom community actually is and what it allows you to do.
Okay. So stop me whenever I'm getting too annoying.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
But the Lightroom community is right in Lightroom. So if you use Lightroom Desktop, it's on the top left. If you have Lightroom Mobile, it's in the bottom bar navigation next to device and device photos and your Lightroom catalog. It's called Community. And if you click on it, you will see other people's photos. It's just what happens. So it's a community. And at the first glance, it might even look a little bit like Instagram or some other social media, but it's not. What you can upload to this community and what you can find in this community is, yes, photos, but it's not about the photos. It's about the edits. It's about the settings. It's about the process. So if you open any of the posts in that community, you can see the editing steps the user took, like not in chronological order because we don't know when a user touched light or masking or whatever, but it's in the order that we think would make most sense to display to users. So you can go back to as shot. Like you can see how did this photo come out of the camera of that photographer. Because if you go to social media, if you go to any community, all photos look amazing. And you look at your own catalog and not all your photos look amazing, right? So other photographers are all better than you are. No, that's not the case. Like everyone takes crappy photos. Everyone needs to edit photos. That's why Lightroom exists, right? So it's just a reality. And in the Lightroom community, you can see that. You can go to the original. And sometimes these look really crappy. And then you look at like, okay, what did he do? Maybe color grading. Maybe turn it something into black and white. Cropping, like how do people crop? There's so much to learn from how other people use crop to make something just a little bit more clean up the composition with cropping. And it's such an amazing place to be inspired about how other people do editing. I just like it very much. And then there are two options for people who upload their edits into that community. Like you could do that. Like it's only only subscribers can upload, because we take the photo from the cloud catalog. If you don't have a subscription on mobile, if you use it for free, then you don't have a cloud catalog, and then you cannot post it to the community, which is sad, but you can still do other things. So if you're a subscriber, you can post your own edits. If you think this is a great edit, or this is an interesting edit, or this is something that I want to share for some other reason, you go to the share menu, share your edit process, share to community, and then you get two options. One is allow others to save this as a preset, right? So you can say, no, this is my editing process. I will not allow other people to have that as a preset, or ridiculous. I'm a pro, so whatever. But most people are not selling presets, and I'm not. So I always say, yeah, allow preset download, of course. And then other people who go to that post in the community can save my edits just as a preset and have it in their own library. So it's a great place to find like billions, I don't know how many, like thousands at least, or millions of presets if you want to. And well, who needs millions of presets? I don't know. But you could also like filter by category: animal photography, street photography, food photography, whatever, and go to that and find presets about that. And then the other option people have when uploading edits to the community is allow remixing. And that is really cool, because I can say, okay, this is my edit. I want to share this edit process with the community and show it. But I also want to see how other people would edit that photo. And if I allow that, then people can go into the remix loop that says, I click the remix button on mobile or on desktop or on web, and then I get all the editing opportunities, possibilities that I have in Lightroom, and I can work on that other person's photo and edit, create something, and crop, and use all the premium tools actually. So if I am a non-subscriber, if I'm a free user on mobile, then I can go into the community and edit other people's photos with all the premium tools. I can even use generative remove and lens blur and all these premium tools that you can usually only have access to when you are a subscriber. Okay, it's not your photo, so that's why we allow it. and the person who posted the photo is a subscriber, so you can use their tools, like their premium tools, and play around with it and experience what those premium tools are. And then if you post that remix, then the original author gets a notification and say, hey, there's a remix for you. And they can learn how other people would edit their photos. And they can even save those remixes from other people on their photo to their own library as a version. So it's a great place to learn, to be inspired, to give back, to contribute, to inspire other people, and to connect. You can also follow other people. There's like many of the usual community features, like commenting are not able, but if remixing is allowed, you can create a remix and that has a comment. So if you want to comment on something, just create a remix. You can write your comment in there. Yeah.
You know, from an educational point of view, this is extremely powerful, because that kind of that sort of backwards engineering is such a powerful way to learn. Not only in photography, but actually in so many different parts of the art. The music is another. I mean, it's very well known on this podcast. We often draw parallels to music, but it's exactly the same thing. That kind of backwards engineering is super powerful, because it means you start with a finished product, and you can break it down. You can learn how this came into being, how the final product actually came together. And that teaches you so much. Often even more, I think to me, it's more powerful than just watching a whole bunch of tutorials on YouTube, for example.
Yes. Yeah. Because you can actually touch it. You can work on it. You can experience it. You can save it as a preset, apply it to your own photos. For me personally, color grading is a challenge. This is something that I always struggled with. How does it really work? And if I see an effect in the community, I go into it and I see, okay, there's color grading on it. I cannot see the actual values directly there, but if I save it as a preset, apply it to my own photo, then I can play around with it, fiddle with it. Of course, my own RAW would probably look different than the author's raw. So yes, presets are always like definite values of settings. It might look great on one photo and stupid on another, but you can still learn from it and see, I need to move the highlights color saturation to blah. I don't even know. So I'm a hobby photographer. Bear with me. I'm not a pro, and I'm definitely not a pro editor on color grading. So other people are, and I can just learn from them. And I think that's really cool for the community.
And I think most
Did
people
you post to the community? I have to ask you something. Did you post to the community?
No, not yet. But I was really fascinated with, when you showed me how it works. And I thought, I'd take this opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation with you about it. But I definitely will. So this is definitely something I want to expand into. Not only the mobile editing part, but also the community thing. I really like it because in photography in general, I like the community aspect of it. I think community in the arts is super important and it's super powerful. It's probably one of the most powerful aspects about when it comes to being involved in the art in general. And to me, the beauty of community is really in the fact that we're now in 2025. We're God 2025. I was just thinking about that. Anyway, um,
It's the future.
I know it is the future. The future's here. Unbelievable. We have communicators in our heads. Every day. What? When I was a kid. Well, when I was a kid, I thought like, the year 2000. Oh my God, that's when the future starts. Now we're
Flying
25.
cars.
Flying cars. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, computers are going to be taking over the world. Well, that kind of has happened, actually. Um, but no, so the thing about community to me is, we're such a million light years away from, the way things used to be, like let's say in the 80s maybe or 90s, when photographers kept their secrets. This is my style. And this is like it's like the Coca-Cola recipe or the KFC fried chicken recipe secret, like I could tell you that I must kill you or something, something like that. And I just love the fact that, now we live at a time where it's so much easier to learn through so many different forms, whether it's YouTube, whether it's communities like that allows to break things down. And so, to me, that's a really important aspect of, and podcasting as well. I mean, if you take this podcast or many podcasts like it as an example, the guests that or the people that are on these kind of shows, really, really talk very openly about how they do what they do, which is it's the premise of the Camera Shake podcast in the first place.
Yes. Obviously, that's not true for everyone. Like, there are still people who have Coca-Cola recipes or KFC recipes they will not share. There are people who make money by selling presets, and that's fine. Like, it's cool. These are mostly great presets, and we're happy that people can make a business on that. And we just integrated import presets into Lightroom iOS last year. So it was always available on desktop and Android, or like not always, but for a while. And on iOS, that was still missing. So you can now import XMPs or zips of XMPs into Lightroom iOS as presets. So that has just been added, especially for people who sell presets. And there was always a workaround. They had to offer DNGs with edits in them, and then people had to like import DNGs and save those edits as presets. So those times are gone. And that's fine, but there's still so many other people who are fine by sharing their processes, by their edits, and you can see like every day so many new posts on the community. I admit it's not nearly as big as Instagram, of course it's not, but it's still more than you can digest. So sometimes I get Katrine's job of curating the featured feed. So if you don't know where to start in the Lightroom community, there's a featured section, and Katrine Eisman is mostly doing the curation for that. Sometimes she's on PDO and asks me to do it. So if you want to be in the featured, send me your link and I might be able to get you. But no, but then I get to look at like all the submissions. Like for a day, I can filter them and I walk through them, and we have several ways of making sure that there's no nudism or something in it, so it's all safe. But then we still want to have a featured post every other hour or something. And so I go through the day's submissions that are eligible. I filter them by topic even, and I still have way too much to look at and to find out, okay, what do I really want to feature? And whenever I go into that back end, I'm just amazed of how much content there's coming in every day.
I think your job would be my daughter's dream job. Like, your job is looking at a mobile phone all day. Brilliant.
I don't do that curation part on a mobile. No.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you about, what do you think the future holds? Like with AI, making inroads and getting better and better and better. What does the future of photo editing hold for us? We're now at a point where, we can do all these things on a device that we can carry in our pockets. Where's this going?
Kersten, if you had asked me this 3 years ago, do you think I would have come up with, there's gonna be something called generative AI and we'll just fill holes and we'll be able to generatively expand our canvas like we can do now in Photoshop, Firefly, all these generative AI stuff that has just started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I didn't see that coming. So I've studied computer science in the 90s, like 1994. I started computer science as my studies in Hamburg. My second topic was philosophy, so that's true. I am not a philosopher. I wouldn't dare to call myself a philosopher. But we had artificial intelligence as a topic in the 90s. And of course, we were talking about that. So what does it mean? What could it mean? What's a neural network? Blah, blah, blah. So all the things that are available now to everyone. And then when was it with ChatGPT, like 3 years back or something, that came in, and then generative imaging, and now in the latest version of Premiere, you have generative expand for video clips, and you can make a video clip longer, and it will just generate a video sequence for you. How would this clip go on? So I wouldn't have expected that, really not. So it's really impressive. And if you're asking me now, how is it going to look like in the future? How the hell should I know? So we all don't know. What we are currently trying to focus on is make all these new possibilities easier to grasp. Like we have just last October, we have introduced quick actions into Lightroom Mobile. It's a new editing section, and it looks at your photo and it can identify, oh, there's a sky. Maybe you want to make the sky more dramatic. Oh, there's a subject. Maybe you want to make it pop. Oh, your angles are skewed because you were trying to make architecture, but you had your camera wrong or like upwards. And then you can like fix angle and it does an auto geometry fixing. Like all these editing options have been there before, but we just make them more approachable for especially newbies, but also like for me, I'm a hobby photographer. I would have never thought about like making the skin of a person in a group portrait a bit smoother. Why should I? I could. Oh, why not? So these things are something that we work on at the moment, expanding the capabilities of those quick actions. But who knows what we're gonna work on next year?
Yeah.
We have ideas, of course. We have roadmaps, but these roadmaps, like in the last years, these roadmaps have been changing faster and faster. So we were planning to do something, and then next month, this is now possible. Let's go for that. And it's an ever faster changing economy.
And you can really tell because the sort of the feature upgrades across Adobe products it's been radical. I mean, I have to say it's hard to keep up. If I was one of these people who made like an update video on the latest features of like Lightroom or Photoshop, I'd be constantly making videos because it's always every 5 minutes.
It's outdated after 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And and this is to me as a as a pro user, I would say, that's really what the value is for me, when it comes to like, the subscription model versus buying a standalone piece of software, for example. To me,
Mhm.
that is absolutely 100% what the value is. The fact that, I'm constantly, um, I'm constantly getting these latest features that make my life easier. And I think we had a conversation about the difference between, let's say, an enthusiast who doesn't necessarily need all those features, maybe, and a professional where time is money, you know, and um, and it's really a matter of, well, if I can shave only 10 seconds off of an edit, well, if I have to deliver 600 or 800 or 1,000 images, then that 10 seconds now turns into 6,000 or 8,000 or 10,000 seconds. And now we're talking real time, you know, and very often, when I'm,
Exactly.
and that's the thing. So, things like, I tell you what, what's really made a big difference to me was AI masking. That is a huge thing.
Select subject, select sky. I use that all the time.
Yeah.
And as you say, the subscription helps us to be able to continuously work on that. So the select subject model is, I don't even know which version we have right now, but the first version of select subject was sometimes not finding all the hair, sometimes like not identifying the correct subject. But now we are like 2, 3, 5 versions in, and it's getting so much better. It's getting faster, it's getting more precise, and all that is only possible because we have the subscription model and we can like update all these capabilities all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference. For me, for instance, things like, skin smoothing is a good example, or eye whitening, iris enhancement. These sort of things. If I can, I mean, this is in my brain, I still can't really compute how it even works, right? Where you apply, because I turn that into presets, and it will then in the next way, it will find the face and apply to. I just sit there and I go like,
Yeah.
"Right, do your magic," that's cool. Uh, and it's just not having to mask things out every time. It's just, that's such a time saver. You know, personally, I'm really big on killing time sucks. I call them time sucks, things that waste my time. I can't personally, my 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 brain, my personality just doesn't like things that suck my time. Um, 'Cause, people often ask me, like, how can you run this podcast? Like, make new episodes, every week, and put out clips and blah, blah, blah,
But that's a
whilst.
time sink, right? So time sinks are great. Time suckers are like
Yes,
really
and
bad.
exactly, and so, the way I can do this, like, whilst having a job and whilst, like, well, I like to stay married, having kids and all that kind of stuff, it's the only way I can do that is by eliminating time sucks. And it's very simple to me. It's like I look at things that suck my time and I kill them. TV being one of them. Like,
Yeah.
TV is such a massive time suck. It's unbelievable.
You
Like,
mean that linear thing where other people decide what you watch?
oh, absolutely, 100%, completely. What a waste of time. Like, if you imagine, like, if you come home after work, right? Here's a little tip for everyone listening. If you come home after work and you turn the TV on, right? And let's say you chill out on a couch, you watch a little bit of TV, watch a movie, watch the news, whatever. Before you know it, you're talking 2 hours. If you do that every day, that's 14 hours. 14 hours a week. Imagine what you could do in 14 hours. You could do a ton. You could make a podcast like this easily in 14 hours. Easily, That's the thing. So it's just about like finding those things and eliminating them. And this is why this is why I like
But you
high.
still do watch streaming videos, right? So
Yeah, exactly. But I can the beauty no, so the beauty of that is that I can basically, it's like Lego, you know? Every day it's like a Lego house. You do things here, and then you have a little bit of time there, and then you do another thing here. In my case, it's like, right, I have to do this job, then I have some time, then I have to do another job, then I have to take the dog out, then my wife screams at me because I haven't done the kitchen, something like that. Um, but there are these opportunities that I use to obviously consume stuff that I want to watch. But now I'm not dependent on the linear programming guys that want to dictate when I can watch the
When
thing
to
I can
watch
watch.
what? Yeah.
Exactly. So I can watch stuff whilst I'm doing the kitchen, right? Whilst I'm doing the dishwasher, whatever. I can find, that spot when I listen to podcasts all the time. Like whilst I'm editing, I listen to podcasts whilst I'm taking the dog out. It's a big one. I never take the dog out without listening to a podcast. So in the car, you know, I actually like listening to your podcast, which we'll talk about in a second, which is such a great
Thank you.
concept. But it's about finding these like these opportune moments and these gaps in that Lego brick wall where you can slot in the things that you really want to do. And that way, it's unbelievable how much you can get done. You know, it's just reorganizing your day. Um, but let's talk about your podcast for a minute. We'll come away from talking Lightroom and and mobile stuff. So y- when I first got to know you, and in fact, the first time I met you was a little over a year ago. At last
In
year's
Birmingham, yeah.
in Birmingham, yeah, at last year's TPS. Now, remember, you told me you run a podcast called Einschlafen, which for the non-German speaking listeners means falling asleep, and it's the most beautiful concept. But actually, I tell you what, I'll let you explain the concept of that podcast.
It didn't have a concept in the beginning. So my idea to start a podcast. So I had a podcast even before. So in 2008, I think I made my first podcast by writing XML code by hand. The RSS feed was like copy pasting actual RSS XML in a text editor. But that was for my band making music. I took it down because we were covering songs and we didn't even know whether we were allowed to publish that as a podcast. Turns out in Germany we were not. Anyways, so in 2010, my kids came to an age. We made it a ritual from birth, actually, like from the very beginning, to read bedtime stories. Like going to bed needs to be a ritual. So that people can fall asleep more easily. So we wanted our kids to be able to fall asleep. So we made it a ritual to read to them bedtime stories. And then at the age of 3 or something, we switched from reading the same very short children's book to reading the next chapter of a longer children's book. So, but there are like these typical German bedtime stories. They're probably also available in English. I have no idea. But one of my favorite in German is Weißt du eigentlich, wie lieb ich dich hab? Do you know how much I love you? It's probably the English title. And there's two rabbits, father rabbit, child rabbit. And yeah, it takes like 10 minutes max to read that story, and you read that the same night the same book every night. And then you switch to some other book like in the next week or something. But there were like a set of maybe 10 of these books that we had for 2 children. And then in 2010, our second child turned 3 and also wanted to switch to like a longer book and a new chapter every evening. But then I thought, I really want to record all these very short children's books in my then voice, in my 2010 voice. Because I wanted my children, whenever they have children, to play those recordings to their own kids, if they have kids someday. We don't know yet. The older daughter is 21, no kids yet, which is fine. So whenever they have kids, they can play that. I actually created an audio CD for that. And then I thought, could I publish that maybe as a podcast? Well, I cannot because of like rights issues. But then, there's public domain books. I looked into that, and the first book that came to my mind was actually an English book because I studied philosophy. It was David Hume, A Treatise on Human Nature, a philosophy book from the 18th century, I don't know, in English, like old English style. Tried to read that as an Einschlafen story in my German podcast, which failed completely. But in the second episode that I created, just out of, I don't know, boredom, I thought this might be cool. I didn't know. I picked Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, Kritik der reinen Vernunft. And I'm still reading it. So I read just 2 or 3 pages, which is really, really boring. This guy wrote really long sentences. And it is even so annoying that I switched from reading that in every episode to just every other episode. And those other episodes, I'm reading something a bit more interesting. At the moment, it's Goethe, The Italian Journey, which is much more interesting to read. And then I go back to Immanuel Kant. Yes, so, and that started in 2010. So that is 15 years now. Like in October, it's going to be 15 years, which is a very long-running podcast. It started like every other podcast with no listeners at all. I talked to my friends about it, but I wasn't in the scene. The scene was very small back then. There was no possible doing any marketing for it back then. There was only the Apple podcast, the iTunes store where you could put it in. And then someday other people picked it up on Twitter back then and talked about it. And for some reason it worked. Like half a year in, I got feedback from someone who told me, hey, via email, I am in a tough situation. I think it was someone from military, actually, who was a doctor, medical doctor in military. And he was using my podcast to like come to rest in the evening. And I thought, wow, my podcast actually means something for people. It's easier for them to fall asleep with that. And they have like challenges falling asleep. Yeah, and since then it just grew. I have been in the iTunes top 10 for a very long time, from like 2013 through 2018 or something. I've been on the top charts. That was cool. And if you are there, then growth comes automatically. I didn't do much about that. So for a very long time, I was, maybe I even still am, one of the most successful German private podcasters. Obviously now there is professional podcasters who are even more successful. Also thanks to Spotify, who put a lot of effort into winning the podcast market, buying the most famous public podcasts into their own Spotify original series and stuff. So the market has changed a lot since 2010. I am still in contact with many people from that early scene, the open source public podcaster scene. Only if it has a public RSS feed is a podcast, otherwise it's not. So anything that happens only on Spotify is not a podcast, technically. And I enjoy it. It's of course my publicity has gone down a little bit in recent years because the competition has just become so much bigger. Even IKEA is doing a fall asleep podcast.
Oh, really?
There is AI generated automatic fall asleep podcasts who just use Gen AI voices to read Wikipedia articles or something, and it is annoying. Also funny. Still, I have a very nice listeners base. They send postcards, they send emails. I'm getting so much great feedback from my listeners that they are, like, through my podcast, are able to fall asleep again. The most common use case actually is depression. So you have no idea how many people suffer from depression, and many of these people have problems falling asleep. And some find my podcast quite useful for that. So that's great to be able to help these people just by sitting down every other week. So it's a bi-weekly podcast that I'm doing right now. I'm talking for an hour. I press record, I talk, I press stop, and I upload. I don't do much editing. They want me to be as authentic as possible, so I'm not cutting out erms or ahs or something. I'm just cutting if someone, if the phone rings, or if something happens, or the cat breaks some glass or something, then I have to cut that out. Obviously, because you cannot fall asleep with that. Yeah. And then, well, cancer medication doesn't let you sleep very well. And breakups, personal tragedies. Those are the main reasons why people cannot fall asleep so easily. And my podcast somehow helps people to get out of their own thought loops and stop thinking about that one problem that they don't have a solution to anyways, and think about other stuff. Like I'm talking about anything. I'm talking in the episode that comes out tonight. So we're recording this March 18th. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that, but today the episode will cover the TPS, of course. Like I've been to London. I've spent a wonderful time with you, with Russell, with all those people at the trade show. And it's always easy to talk about travel. So I like traveling a lot because that gives me a lot of content to talk about in my Einschlafen podcast.
It's such a
Yeah.
great idea. And I remember like last year when you explained the basic concept of it, I still remember it because you said like, well, I talk about stuff that's kind of interesting, but not interesting enough so you don't fall asleep. And I thought like, this is perfect. And I
Well, you
listened.
will not be able to fall asleep to today's episode because it's about TPS. And there's
Yeah.
always like something. I had episodes where I talked about chocolate or something, and there was some chocolate aficionado like who's really into chocolate, and he couldn't fall asleep, and he complained that I talk about chocolate.
Oh
Well,
no.
all right, there's always someone who will not be able to fall asleep to that episode because it's always a topic.
I
Yeah,
listened only very recently. I listened to one of your episodes where you were talking about solar panels,
yeah.
and you were talking about your dad installing solar
Mhm.
panels back in the early 2000s or late 90s or something like that. So very early on,
Uh,
when it,
Early 90s, yeah.
yeah. And I remember it was like, it was exactly that sort of level where it's like, it's actually interesting, really. I mean, it is actually interesting. And then maybe it's not so interesting after like an hour.
It's not important. Like it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, exactly.
It's nothing you need to know. Like it's nothing you need to stay awake for, and like you're really excited to learn more about. Yeah.
Yeah. I, y-
Well,
you know,
sometimes it works. Sometimes not.
Exactly. Yeah, it's perfect. Like for me, I mean, I always say, as far as the Camera Tech podcast is concerned, like if you're into photography, this might be quite useful. Hopefully, it is. But if you're not into photography, I still highly recommend you listen to it because it will definitely send you to sleep in 5 minutes flat. You know?
I don't
So-
think so because I tried dialogues,
Mhm.
interviews. It didn't
Okay.
work out. People
Oh,
didn't
really?
like two different voices. That didn't work for people.
Oh.
They want one voice, one speaker, monologues. It also helps me to get the dynamics out of my voice. So I'm very relaxed. I'm not excited. I'm not laughing. I'm not getting louder and more quiet. So all these dynamics are removed by mainly like sitting on my sofa and speaking to myself. I'm alone in a room for an hour, just babbling away. Like, well, how can I even get to dynamics?
This is what I said to my wife. I said, like, Toby's voice is perfect for it because you're getting into this groove, and it's just perfectly tuned to what you're trying to achieve in that podcast, which is beautiful. And I'm always
Mhm.
jealous of people who have like radio voices. Like I'm friends since I've been doing this for like 4 years or something. I've become friends with people in the world of podcasting, especially photography podcasting. And I'm super jealous. Like a friend of mine, Steve Brazel, from behind the shot. He, the man has the perfect radio voice. It's also not surprising because he actually used to work or still actually works in radio. Or I think in Boo-Ray Perry, um, from the Photobomb podcast, the same thing. It's just the perfect radio voice. And I listen to these sultry voices and I'm thinking, oh man, that'd be cool. Maybe one day when I grow up, I'll have a voice like that.
Your voice is fine, but radio voices are great. Have you heard about the concept of a radio phase? Because I'm making another podcast with a radio person from Berlin, and he always said, I have a radio face, which means
Yeah.
I consider myself ugly.
Yeah, face
So
for
I'm
radio.
not a TV face. I will not never be on TV. So my voice is fine. My face doesn't even matter.
What's interesting is, I mean, for me, it's relatively easy because I have a conversation with somebody, so it's relatively easy to create an episode like that. But was it in the beginning? Was it difficult for you to just talk to a microphone or a camera without having anybody there to sort of bounce off of?
That's 14 years ago, 15 years ago. Yes, my first episodes also were much shorter. So today it's mainly an hour, sometimes 45 minutes, sometimes a bit longer than an hour. My first episodes sometimes were just 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So, but then I did like one episode every day. Like the
Right.
beginnings were a bit more wild and diverse, and I didn't know what I was doing actually. So I somehow found my way into it, I guess. Reading books is helpful because I don't need to pay so much attention on what I'm actually saying. I'm just reading. I'm actually, when I read Kant, then I'm turning into a text to speech converter. So I don't really digest what I'm saying. I just turn those words on that page. I sometimes get into a rhythm of like going my voice down when there's a full stop, or some like I can react to those things, but still I don't even know when the sentence started. So that's long gone. I have no idea what I'm talking about. It's the topic is so complicated. I've read like 700, 800 pages of a very complicated philosophical book. I would not be able to say what's in it. Like some concepts, yes. But even like while reading it, I can think about other stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna be finished in like 5 minutes. So in my head, these thoughts like already turn about what's going to happen next. What time is it actually? What do I do after recording? And while I'm thinking about that, I'm still reading and speaking, and that machinery somehow works.
And I have to say this for our English speaking audience. Immanuel Kant is an actual
Yes,
author.
it's not Cunt, it's Kant.
Yeah, this isn't like an opportunity to use swear words on this podcast. That's an actually legitimate poet.
Do you have
This-
to put the explicit label now?
well, probably, yeah. I guess so. I don't know. Not that it matters on this podcast anyway.
It's philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Um, the thing about podcasting is, and you mentioned it a minute ago. The thing I like is the journey. You know, if I think back to when Nick and I first started this podcast, how different it is now from the beginning, and the amount of stuff that I've learned, certainly, when it comes to podcasting, and the process, and just the general zen of it. How's that been for you? I mean, you've been doing it for 14 years.
Oh man, yeah. The main challenge for me probably is to find topics that I haven't talked about too often already. Like I'm doing like bi-weekly episodes, so I need something to talk about. And if I didn't travel, so what am I talking about? So coming up with new topics is always a challenge, and this is actually quite inspiring for me. Even for my life. Just recently, I did an episode on TV shows. Like, what TV shows did I like in history when I was a kid, when I was growing up? Now, was Game of Thrones really such a catastrophe in the last episodes? How about How I Met Your Mother last episode? What a fuck up! Or explicit language. And it's interesting. It's a way for me to find reflection, and also like the feedback that I get from listeners has changed over time. In the beginning, where there was none, then there were these early reports of it is actually valuable. I had a phase where I was actually asking for donations because I needed money for web space, for microphones, for hardware, for something, and I did get a lot of donations from my listeners, which was fantastic, but actually was so much I didn't need that much money. Now I have a job at a great company. We just talked about it. I have enough money, so I don't need the money anymore. I'm actually asking my listeners now to donate to other things like Doctors Without Borders or whatever they're called, Greenpeace. You can donate to people who actually need money. That's much more valuable even to me than like getting that money. Maybe later, maybe if I don't have that job anymore, I know that some of the friends that I made in the beginning of the early podcasting days, they have turned that into a job. They live off of podcasting now, which is fantastic. Maybe that happens to me, then I will change that. It's a journey that continues. It always is inspiring to see. And then like at the high times when I had 200,000 downloads per episode each week or every other week, of course there was also the question, okay, so you're doing this podcast and you're talking about so many different things. You have so many hobbies like photography, astronomy, traveling. You have 2 kids. You have a house, a garden. Like, how do you do all that? Like, as you said, cutting out those time sucks. That is good. For me, it's also about perfectionism because I'm far from a perfectionist. I'm not. So I'm. You know the Pareto principle? Is it called Pareto in English? It's an Italian guy, and like when did he live? I don't even know. But Pareto Prinzip in German. It is a rule. It's not a rule, but it's a principle you can apply where with 20% of the effort you reach 80% of the goal.
Yes, the 80-20 rule.
And if you wanna be a perfectionist and get the last 20% of your goal, then you have to spend 80% of the effort on those last 20%. And I just don't do that. So I'm always happy with 80% of my goal, and I get there quite quickly, and then I move on to the next. So that's something that I learned during that journey, that you don't need to be a perfectionist. If you are, well, bad luck.
Well, and this is super interesting that you mentioned that, because in actual fact, last year at the photography show, my talk was on it was mobile video editing for podcasters, right? And the 80-20 rule played a really important role in that. So in a
I missed
nutshell,
that talk. Probably I had boost service.
yeah, you probably, yeah. But so the 80-20 rule really, it basically means how can you get 80% of the outcome with 20% of the input, And so the example that I gave back then was, when I first started the podcast, I started it with a friend of mine, Nick, and we we made the podcast, we made each episode together. And so what would happen would be, I would do essentially the pre-production, so I would get hold of the guest and arrange days and times for the interviews. I would email back and forth. I would plan the interviews. I would do all the research beforehand, so that we know who we're talking to. I know their back catalog and all that kind of stuff. So I'd sort of lead the interview as well, and then Nick would do, because he was a trained audio engineer and a videographer. He would do the audio processing and the video editing, and then I would basically promote the podcast on social media afterwards. So it's roughly it's about a 50-50 split. And of course, when Nick sort of exited the show, the question was, well, what am I going to do? Because I really like to carry it on. And the reality was, now I'd have to do twice the amount of work, and it would take up twice the amount of time. And so I think this was the only time where I took a week off in 4 years, because I needed that week to basically just break down the whole process from the very start to the very finish. And I took every single step of the workflow and I applied the 80-20 rule to every single step of it. And what that did was, first of all, it kind of exploded the whole process. But it also meant that I had to find ways and tools to allow me to, to do the whole thing. So, take audio processing as an example. Like, Nick is a trained audio engineer. He had his own studio. He was really good at processing audio. And so I had to find ways of making that process easy for me. And you'd think like, well, I had a career in the music industry, I should know how to do it. But I'm a guitar player. I'm not a studio engineer. It's the truth. I know a little bit about audio processing, and engineering and stuff, but I'm not like a trained audio engineer.
So you're not using Auphonic?
No, so I actually, I managed to. I tried a number of different things. I use Adobe Podcast, which does a brilliant no, it does a brilliant job. Um, the end result sounds really good. Does it sound as good as, Nick, the trained audio engineer with like decades of experience mixes that thing? No, it doesn't. But does it get me 80% there? Hell yes, it does. And the difference is, my input is, well, I upload the audio file, I let Adobe do its magic, brrrt, you know, and then I use a little slider, you know, and then I download the thing and it sounds great. And then I upload it back into my editing software, I sync it, all done. So for me, that works. And
Interestingly, I am still at our competition. Like I started the podcast 14 years ago, and then like 5 years in, that guy from Austria, I think Vienna, Georg, he came up with auphonic.com, and they do exactly that, like automatic audio post-production and a lot of automation. Like you have a preset there with like all the metadata already prepared. You can upload a text file of chapter marks, and then you hit run. It does all these automatic things. It just sounds wonderful enough, and then it uploads it automatically to my FTP and distributes it everywhere. So that's what I still use. I know that Adobe has a product on its own now, and I also know who built it. They're also in Hamburg. Some of them. They actually used my podcast recordings to train the AI for some things, to analyze what do we actually need to do. I gave them my raw recordings, and whatever came out of Auphonic is obviously public. Yes, it's great that this product works for you, and that's exactly the way to go. Like, just don't make it perfect. If you can get there with 20% of the effort to at least 80% of what your actual goal is, fine.
Because, the sum of all of these different elements, when you really break the whole workflow down, the sum of it is much greater than you could possibly have imagined it from the outset. And you're now in a position where you can actually do it.
It's all about growth and learning.
Yeah.
Just like in photography, it's about growth and learning. It's about trying
Exactly.
things out. It's about experiencing failures. It's like making stupid stuff, making it often enough, and then getting better at it.
Absolutely. And also, and this is the other thing, I think, also allowing yourself to just do stuff that you like doing. Just allow yourself to do stuff that you love. Like, I don't know how many times, probably hundreds of times, people have said,
did I
like,
tell you about my 12 by 12 challenge, by the way? Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Oh,
But
no.
I just remembered. So I started my photography career actually professionally when my dad had a little private business as a wedding photographer. So like
okay.
event photography at weddings. People were very happy with it, and he took me into the business. He offered me to like first join him in post-production, creating an album, like physical album. And that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And then when I was 17 years old, he said, Toby, you can do that now. Here's my camera. It was a Nikon X700. And here's 20 rolls of film. Go to that wedding and like shoot those rolls of film, like make people happy. And I did that for like 1 or 2 years. So that was my beginning of my photography career. It was the only time when I made money out of photography directly. And now I'm back at making money with photography, but not directly, like in the software industry. But I consider myself a hobby photographer. But I still love film photography. I still have that Minolta X700 camera. I also have other beautiful film cameras. And then someday, when my digital, I had the dream of like someday I need a full frame camera in digital, and then I remembered, oh, I do have a full frame. It's just not digital. It's my compact. It's my Minolta, so I can use that. And then I thought I can even go bigger. I could do medium format, and then I went into medium format photography. So I have a very nice variety of medium format cameras and also 35mm cameras, but I don't use them often enough. I have my wonderful Nikon digital cameras. I do photography with my iPhone, but film photography, sometimes I do it, but not often enough. And I have set this wonderful Hasselblad. I actually got it from a colleague of mine in Basel. His dad had it, and I had a different version of the Hasselblad. I had a 500, and then he said, "Look what I have. It's a 503 CW. I don't even know what that is. I don't know how to handle it. Do you want it?" And he sold it to me with a very great price, because he just wanted it to be in someone's hands who knows how to do with it, what to do with it, and to use it. But I didn't use it. So this year I came up with a 12 by 12 challenge. 12 months. Every month I shoot one roll of 120 film, which is 12 pictures in 6 by 6. So I have 12 times 12 pictures, and then I select 4 each month and put them into a 2 by 2, which is then like 6 plus 6 is 12. It's 12 by 12. So it's a 12 by 12 challenge. And it's the limitation of just shooting one roll, or just shooting one roll for that challenge, makes me at least shoot this one roll. And I immediately, like in January, I just shot this one roll. And then in Feb, I shot 2 rolls. I went back to also do black and white film photography and develop it at home. And then March, I had my Hasselblad with me in London. You've seen me changing film all the time. I think I shot like 7 rolls of medium format film while I was in London. So yeah, that was a good going to getting more creative by limiting yourself to this one challenge.
And
Why did you tell all that? I don't even know.
this was the thing I loved about the shoot that we did at the Adobe headquarters, because it was actually beautiful, because we had everything there. We had Russell shooting on iPhone. We had you shooting on film. We had Joel Grimes shooting on the Fuji um, medium
GFX.
format GFX, yeah, GFX 100 or whatever it was he was shooting. Um, and there was just this. I don't know. It was just this immense variety of photography going on in that one room. It's just beautiful. It was very, very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
very.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I have some really cool BTS footage of that, which I'll put together.
Hmm.
I think in a little clip or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, it was a great day. Good fun. Also, nice running
I
track.
learned a lot about lighting in that, because obviously my film, I didn't have a connector for my Hasselblad to those flashes that Joel brought. So I used the steady light. So I learned very much about like setting up the lights and looking at Russell's process and Joel's process. And Kirk was there also shooting, and I think you took also some photos. That was very inspiring for me. I think I learned a lot about lighting in that context.
It's always the best. I mean, I find that I've always found that when you can be in a room and you watch somebody's process, you learn so much. And it's not just about the lighting setup; it's about the whole thought process. It's about the process, because you. So when you watch a YouTube video, somebody can explain a lighting setup and stuff, and that's all cool. Um, what you really find when you're in a room with a photographer, like Joel Grimes is like the lighting guru. Um, it's really interesting to look at his process, because he'll take a picture, he'll look at the screen. You can see the same screen on the back of the camera that he sees, and he'll then make decisions based on that, and you can follow these decisions. So you can understand how he thinks and how he alters the setup in order to get to where he wants to get to. That's the thing you
While at the
can't.
same time listening to what he's saying to the model and what he's saying to the people
Exactly.
who help him set up the lights. And yeah.
Exactly, exactly, and that's what you can't get from watching a YouTube video, and this is why I find this I find it such a powerful way of learning. And I always say to people, if you have an opportunity to go in a workshop with somebody, like that, do it. It's such a great way, because it's also interactive. You can ask questions. You know, that's the thing that you can't, like with a YouTube video, or even something like Creative Life or something. Where you have basically a video. I'm a very visual learner, so this works very well for me, but you still don't have the interaction where you can actually ask questions and, um, and so that's why to me, I'll take any opportunity like that to learn stuff. And I always learn stuff. There's always stuff I pick up, like I didn't know there's so many things. Like just hanging out with you, I've learned so many things. I didn't know that there was a Lightroom community, stuff like that. Obviously, yeah, and
Yeah.
it all adds up. I mean, this is that's the thing. That's the thing that I love, which is why I'm such a proponent of taking opportunities like the photography show or like Imaging USA or WPPI, wherever you have opportunities to learn. And I always say this, I've said it a million times, and I'll say it again. If you think that going to a show like that, like the photography show, is all about spending money on stuff you don't need, you're missing the point entirely. There've been so many great opportunities to learn. Um, I mean, and Adobe actually, they're really at the forefront of that as well because Adobe are one of the few. I mean, there's a number of sensible stages, but the Adobe stage is always busy with stuff, and that's I actually I
The Adobe
like the
stage is nice. It's
yeah.
smaller, but we have people like Julianne Cost, like Russell Brown, Joe Grimes, Katrina Eisman, who talk about interesting stuff. Obviously, yes, it's mostly about Adobe products, but it's also about processes. And Katrina and I did a lot about the Lightroom community there. So yes, I'm already now looking forward to next year's photography show. I am hoping that I can be there again. I'm guessing there's gonna be an Adobe booth again. Uh, I don't know whether we applied for it yet, but I very much enjoy that. And yes, absolutely agree. Experiences way over equipment. Yeah. You
Absolutely.
can buy equipment as much as you want. If you don't have any experiences, it's not worth it.
Yeah, all the gear and no idea, as I call it. You know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. And what I particularly like about the Adobe stage is the fact that there were so many things that you guys did where it was literally from creation. Like Russell would take a picture on the iPhone and then he would edit on the screen, and so you could see it from the very beginning to the very end, all in one thing. Um, and that's a process
Have you
I
been there when Hanemühle was there? So we had one time we had the Hanemühle guy walking in, and he actually printed whatever Russell just edited live on stage to his beautiful paper.
And
So
that is something I missed. I actually, because I was busy at the show as well, so I've unfortunately missed a lot of stuff. I need to. This is actually one of the things, one of the takeaways that I'm taking away from this show experience is that I actually want to next year. I want to make sure that I have time to actually enjoy some of the education myself because I'm usually
mhm.
running around like I had this chicken. I was doing a lot of stuff, whether it was for
Giving interviews, making interviews.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And being on stage and working with brands and all that kind of stuff. So it's really busy, but I want to make sure that I have actually time to take advantage of some of those things because there's some great speakers there. On the Adobe
Yeah.
stage, some fantastic speakers. Um, and really across the show, also on the TPS stage, there's some fantastic stuff going on. Um,
Mhm.
and I always feel I don't know. There's some FOMO. I was, I fear of missing out.
You can't
WPPI is
experience
having
everything. Like
well,
some of these things are happening in parallel, and then there's also these other beautiful things that happen just at booths. You had this camera obscura.
oh yes.
What's his name again? Barry. Forgot his last name.
Oh, I can't remember.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so yeah, he had this cardboard camera obscura room where you could walk in and
yeah,
experience the camera
unbelievable.
from the inside. Amazing. And so yeah, lots of cool stuff happening
Yeah,
at the TPS.
lots of cool stuff. Lots of great people to talk to as well.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
the other thing that I always say. It's such a great opportunity to network. This WPPI is happening as we speak, as we're recording this right now, and I have unbelievable FOMO that I'm not there, but it's just not happening this year. Maybe next year, probably next year.
Yeah,
But you know,
that's in Las
um,
Vegas, right?
yeah, it is, and it's so I
Uh,
went to imaging in Dallas a few weeks ago, and it's basically a very similar crowd. So I'm already seeing a lot of my friends in Vegas right now. I'm thinking, oh man, if only, but it's just not
you can't
happening
be
anymore.
everywhere. Yeah.
No, you can't be everywhere, and also. like I mentioned earlier, I'd like to stay married. That's the other thing.
That's a good choice, I guess.
Yeah. I know. Um, Man, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time. There's so many things we could talk about. We haven't even really gotten into film photography. That's another thing we could
No,
talk
right.
about. You know, um,
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you for inviting me at last. I tried to convince you last year already. We got to know each other a bit more this year, spending so much time with Russell pre-show. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. It was awesome having Toby on the show. But before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 187 with Russell Preston Brown. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy this content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us keep bringing you amazing episodes. I have no idea why I keep saying us. It's really just me. Anyway, and for those of you listening on audio, did you know that there's a video version of this podcast over on YouTube? Well, you should by now because I keep mentioning it all the time. Just head over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you can watch all of our my past episodes on there. And if you're already there, be sure to drop a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps me reach even more people across the globe. See how I did the me instead of the us? Because that's what the thing says. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and watching. Remember, new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars, diaries, whatever your kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.